It was an overcast and snowy winter's day when the joy thief first appeared. I looked outside through my window and saw him standing down the street, at least 200 yards away or more. But somehow I could tell he was looking right at me. The man was standing in the middle of the street, in the cul-de-sac down the road from my apartment building. He was wearing a coat that looked too thin for the weather and his clothes were all black. His eyes were covered with dark sunglasses despite the gray day. Startled, I froze. I stared right back at him, knowing he was looking at me and wondering why and how he could be doing such a thing from so far away. I got the immediate impression that he was not human, and that his eyes could see much further than any person could. Shuddering involuntarily, I turned away from the window and took a few unsteady steps into the kitchen. I dumped my coffee into the sink and discarded the Danish in my hand into the trash bin, no longer feeling hungry, no longer wanting coffee, which I usually loved so much. The Danish sat on top of the disgusting refuse in the garbage can and I felt a pang of regret. It was from the bakery downtown that I loved so much. Why had I done that? But as I thought about the man down the street staring at me again, I closed the lid, knowing for certain it had been the right decision. The Danish was too sweet, after all. I didn't have a taste for that sort of thing anymore. Not recently. When I looked back out the window, the man was gone. He had vanished from the street despite the fact I had seen him there only moments before. I saw the joy thief again just before Christmas, when I was out shopping for gifts at the mall. He was inside this time, up on the second floor, looking down at me from above. I felt him looking at me, the same as the first time. A tingling sensation on the back of my neck that made me glance up and all around, trying to find the source of that strange feeling. And then I spotted him. He was leaning against the glass railing and looking down at me through his sunglasses. Still wearing those, despite the fact that we were indoors. I noticed his hair was long and salt and pepper, gray in places too. He wore that same dark jacket and black pants and his face had a slight overgrowth of beard, like someone who had not shaved for several days. Feeling an odd sense of déjà vu, I shuddered and looked away. When I glanced up there again, he was gone. I ran up to the second floor to see if I could spot him again, but I couldn't find him anywhere. I left the mall without buying gifts for anyone. My mind was too distracted and I just wasn't in the Christmas spirit. Even though I usually loved the holiday season, it just wasn't the same that year. Instead of going to the family events as I usually did, I stayed home that year and told them I wasn't feeling well. I didn't watch my usual Christmas movies or put up a tree either, and as a result felt strangely guilty about all of it. Melancholy and dissociation ruled my mind as I waited for the season I usually loved so much to pass by. Finally, after a long and harsh winter, spring came, and then summer. One day in July my brother called me and asked if I wanted to go out golfing with him. I told him of course, I always loved golfing. It was one of the few sports I enjoyed playing, if you can even call it a sport. It's mostly just walking and swinging a stick occasionally. Maybe that's why I liked it so much. We got out to the course and went up to the counter to pay for our green fees. "That'll be $22.50, said the man in the booth. I paid with debit and while I was waiting for it to be processed I saw there was suddenly somebody else in the pro shop with us. A man in a dark jacket with black pants was standing in the corner, admiring the putters. A mirror was propped up against the wall and I saw that he was not actually looking at the golf clubs, instead he was looking at me through the mirror. Through his sunglasses. It was the joy thief, staring at me. I had already come to understand that was what he was, not a human at all but a supernatural being posing as one. When I saw him I felt freezing cold, goosebumps breaking out on my skin everywhere. "Hey!" I realized the guy behind the counter was shouting at me, and had been trying to get my attention. I spun around and looked at him and noticed his annoyed expression. He had been trying to get my attention for a while, it seemed. "Thought I lost you there for a minute. Did you want your receipt?" "No, thanks," I said, trying to maintain my composure. Turning around, I looked and saw the joy thief had vanished. He had disappeared completely. "Hey, do you know who that guy was who was in here a minute ago?" I asked. But the clerk had no idea what I was talking about. "You're the first ones who've come in all day. You sure you're not seeing things?" I shook my head and apologized, saying I'd had a long week. My brother didn't seem to buy it, and neither did the guy behind the counter. They exchanged a concerned look. Big surprise, we got out on the golf course and began to play, and I felt as if I got no enjoyment from any part of the game. My drive was slicing, my irons were topping the ball, my short game sucked, and my putting was atrocious. Not only that, but I lost my favorite club somewhere and never ended up finding it despite trekking all across the course searching for it in vain. I didn't enjoy myself for the first time ever while playing golf, and left there even more dispirited than ever. How was it that the joy thief knew just what I loved most? And how could he take it all away with only a look? It didn't seem fair. I began to spiral into a depression of sorts, seeing the joy thief more and more. Always when I expected him least, at the moments when I should have felt happiest. Everything I had ever loved was gradually sapped of its appeal. Books by my favorite authors were cast aside, a quarter finished. Paintings I had started were tossed in the trash, looking unsatisfying and often their composition, unfixable. Same with the short stories and poems I had once loved to write. My video game controllers got dusty and my D&D group stopped calling. All my friends eventually stopped contacting me too, and soon the joy thief took up residence with me. I saw him out of the corner of my eye all the time, just in the shadows. But when I turned to look, he wasn't there. He was evasive and impossible to see. That was the most terrifying part, that made me feel the most afraid, was that I could never really see his face beyond that briefest glimpse of sunglasses and a slight growth of beard. It felt like I would go mad if I couldn't finally see this specter who was tormenting me. And then I remembered the mirror in the pro shop at the golf course. Maybe a reflection would allow me to catch a glimpse of him. So I set up mirrors everywhere. In every possible place in my apartment. Large and small, I set them up on every surface to try and finally see my tormentor. The thief of my joy. I sat there on my couch, surrounded by mirrors, and waited for him to appear. Finally he did. And with the mirrors, there was no place for him to hide. I could see his face as clear as day. And I realized with a start that I recognized him. "Dad?" He said nothing, only stared at me through his favorite pair of dark sunglasses. The jacket he always wore and the black pants, I finally understood why it had all been so familiar. And that was when I realized what I had been missing all along. My father, now deceased, was the one I used to go golfing with every summer, along with my brother. He showed me everything I knew about the game and how to play, my grip, my swing, my stance. If not for him I never would have played at all. But now he was gone. He had passed away the year before. The last time I had seen him alive, we had played a game of golf. That year had also been my first Christmas without him. The first time I had seen the figure was just shortly after my dad had died, I realized as the puzzle pieces slotted together. But my dad would never want me to feel joyless. He had always been smiling and laughing, making jokes and telling stories. "You're not really him," I said aloud. "If you were, you wouldn't be stealing my joy. You're just something else pretending to be my dad. Feeding off my memories to feed yourself." The thing masquerading as my father sneered and pulled its sunglasses down a bit, revealing the dark cavities in its skin where eyes should have been. "Take off that mask and show yourself for what you really are," I told the creature. It did, peeling off a thin facade of cracking skin that comprised its face. Immediately its flesh crumbled like thousand-year-old parchment paper, it turned to dust, and the creature revealed itself. I saw it was the size of a small fairy, like Tinker Bell. Only it was hideous and deformed like a demon. "Die, you fucking parasite," I said with authority, swinging my fist around and smashing it against the wall like a cockroach. When I lifted my hand, it was gone. As if it had never even been there to begin with. "I've been feeling a little better lately. Things will never completely be the same again, I know that. But last summer I went out and played golf with my brother again and found myself smiling and having fun. The things I loved, the things that brought me the most joy, they aren't going to come back overnight. And the joy thief could come back at any time to try and rob me of it all again. But I'm determined not to let him.